All right, I'm reading Chapter 13, Mediterranean Sea. Who knew yachting meant swimming in poo? Kefalonia, Greece. The main premise of Jean-Paul Sartre's huis clos, No Exit, is l'enfer, c'est les autres. Or in English, hell is other people. I learned that the hard way, on a yacht in the Mediterranean. I'd like to add a caveat that anyone who quotes French philosophers and casually throws around yachting is likely insufferable. That was something I was deeply grappling with at this point in my life. Being an expat, a lot of my time was spent with well-educated people, often with high incomes and privileged backgrounds. I had also met many English language teachers who had found by working abroad, they oftentimes paid more than teachers in the US. I had a theater teacher friend who got paid triple her usual salary while living in China. In the US, people would say, "What valuable skills do kids learn in theater? We should cut the budget and put it in math and science." In China, they saw English-speaking theater classes as a chance for their Chinese children to learn Western mannerisms and how to convey emotion in a Western way. That way, their children could work abroad. I was also adopting foreign mannerisms. I had already started to use a lot of British phrases, picked up from all the British men I had dated, and from being around people who had been taught British English as their second language. Living abroad was beyond the grasp of most people, and having lived in New Canaan, one of the richest towns in America, and Luxembourg, one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world, and now Shanghai, the richest city in China, I was starting to become, for lack of a better word, a douchebag. From my childhood, I had some grounding and empathy for people who were considered outsiders. So that's not to say that I was a difficult person, but I was slowly jet-setting from snobby to snobbier to snobby-est. In New Canaan, my family was always the town trash, or as people politely called it, townies. Townies were the poor people who lived close enough to walk into town. On my side of the tracks, to keep us entertained cheaply, my mom would take us to play in the rivers behind people's homes. The first step in the process was walking to the very back of a cul-de-sac and then eyeing each house, trying to decide which one was the least likely to arrest us for trespassing. Then we'd sneak down the edge of someone's well-groomed lawn, past their back patio with a hot tub or pool, and slip into the water in our bikinis with our fishing nets to chase after minnows and crawfish to our heart's content. It was so much fun. Maybe I also love graveyards because that was another location where we'd play. There was also that one time in high school when I was babysitting, and I opened the door to find two police officers. My mind raced. Had the parents died in a crash on their way home, and I, a teenager, would have to raise these two kids on my own? "Hi, little lady, do you know that man over there?" one of the cops asked, pointing to my dad's beat-up secondhand SUV parked nearby on the street. On this weekend with me, he parked outside to take me to his place after I finished at work. The cop, seeing his old truck in between all the mansions, must have been concerned when he said something along the lines of, "I'm waiting for a teenage girl to come out of the house over there." I explained that was my dad. "Oh my God, are our kids okay?" the parents that I was babysitting for screamed as they ran out of their car, having just come home from dinner, to cops outside their home. "Just a mix-up," the officer said. I tried to smile politely, not wanting to lose my job. Since my parents didn't hang out with any of the other parents in town, I'd found the job through a high school job center, where people would call in and leave notes for any high schoolers looking to make extra cash. I came from that place, and as an adult who could afford to take absurd trips, I craved being on a yacht. After all, my dream since childhood had been to be an international business lady. Still living in Shanghai, but having switched jobs since working in the wine industry, I was now global content marketing manager at an international luxury company, overseeing global campaigns with models we'd handpicked and flown in from all over the world. More importantly, for the first time in my career, I was a boss. I had hired and trained a full-time writer as well as a number of contractors. I had had many shitty bosses in the past, so this was my chance to start to formulate the version of, quote, the man I wanted to be. Did I want to haze those below me? Did I want to be their friend? Or did I want to be something in between that evokes some sort of a healthy work environment? This was my chance to do some good while getting paid more. With my new wealth, I could buy frivolous things like a designer handbag. But every time it came time to click add to cart, it felt ridiculous to spend that money on something so unnecessary. Calculating how many hours of work it took to afford it made me feel less excited. My time felt more valuable. However, I had found a Lululemon hookup at the fabric market. While there, a Chinese woman with her cap pulled down over her face whispered to me, "Lululemon?" She looked both directions and opened her jacket to reveal a bright purple slim-fit zip-up, new with tags. I followed her back to her stall where in a hidden cabinet she had stacks and stacks of workout clothes, tags still on. She definitely knew someone at their official factory in China, so I was wearing real Lululemon even if I was paying half the price. It felt like I had made it. Or more specifically, like I didn't have any children of my own. So why not put my money towards spending a week playing an adult child? Men do this all the time, so why can't I be a man-child myself and get drunk on a boat? In other words, if men can be toxic, why can't I? I aspire to be insufferable, at least in my free time. I heard about this thing called Yacht Week, where a bunch of young European professionals met up in the Mediterranean and traveled around on a fleet of yachts. It was basically a bunch of beautiful, rich, young, drunk people with sexy accents partying together. A colleague explained after I told her I was looking for yachting options. My friend from college is organizing his own yacht trip to raise funds for his charity. The charity takes underage men who would normally go to jail and instead sticks them on a boat together, and they compete in a race across the Atlantic. To raise funds, and since a donor donated a boat in Spain, he's doing back-to-back week-long trips across the Mediterranean. Should be a lot of fun. Looking at their website, I discovered it was considerably more reasonably priced for a yacht trip, $650 for a whole week. And as an added bonus, my payment would go towards their charity to help incarcerated youth. Messaging a few friends, I convinced Evelyn, who I had known since high school, and Nermeen, who I had met while living in Luxembourg, to come with me for a week as I traveled from Greece to Montenegro. To kick off our adventure, we met with a group who had spent the past week on the yacht. They sat at a table together, eyes glazed over, as if they had just returned from war. They were sleep-deprived and bummed out, as if someone had beaten their souls out of them. It was not what I expected after a week of yachting. "The motor almost fell off," one of them told me. He didn't make eye contact, but instead looked off into the distance as if he'd been trapped on Noah's Ark and not allowed to swat at the 2 sole mosquitoes trying to survive the flood. What? The motor wasn't hooked on properly, so it almost fell off the boat. We had to spend 3 days at a marina getting it fixed. 3 days! Another person screamed as if the trauma was still too fresh to process. This was unsettling, but maybe it was an extenuating circumstance. We're going to be on a yacht. As the last groups headed to the airport, my group slowly arrived. The trip would include a hippie in her 60s, the mother of a friend of the guy who ran the charity, a couple in their 30s who had just had a baby and were on their honeymoon. They left the baby back home. Logan, our captain, and the founder of the charity, 2 deckhands, a college student from 2 weeks ago who ended up never leaving after the trip, who I'll call Sea Dog, Nermeen, Evelyn, and me. Other than my friends and I, everyone was from Florida. While I had pictured a week trapped on a boat with sultry tan Europeans, I was instead on one with a bunch of Floridians who didn't seem to really have ever left Florida. Even worse, the people in charge of this little floating piece of wood, our itinerary, feeding us, were all college guys in their 20s. If you don't know a lot about Florida, my best advice would be to Google Florida man and the day and month of your birthday. Whatever headlines come up should accurately sum up Florida and how it is a unique corner of the earth and the schlong of America. It has the wrong kind of big dick energy. Through my travels, I've met many Europeans who, used to the scale of Europe, think that you can ride a train from the one side of the US to the other in about a day. They don't realize how large our country is. With that scale comes many different types of Americans and the opportunity for different local cultures to form. People from the East Coast may not know a lot of Southerners, or people from the West Coast don't know a lot of Easterners. In my experience, I didn't know how good tacos could truly be until I visited LA. And I didn't know how good white gravy on biscuits could be until I went to New Orleans. I knew more about Shanghainese food and culture than I did anything about Florida. The week on the yacht together would be a week-long crash course on their culture, beliefs, and customs. When you picture a yacht, you would probably imagine paparazzi pictures of Elon Musk shirtless somewhere, or Paris Hilton throwing Veuve Clicquot pillows up in the air while smiling. A yacht is technically any boat longer than 40 feet. And in this case, we were on a 65-foot sailing yacht. This meant that the entire top of the boat was a bunch of sails and thick ropes you could pull on to get places. Not a helipad or a nice vignette to have breakfast. Below deck, where all 10 of us would be living, was about the size of a 2-bedroom New York City apartment with no AC, a limited water supply, and a toilet with a pump motor. Very quickly, we realized that the experience was going to be more like camping than pretending to be Jeff Bezos. The couple on their honeymoon was given the private room. Nermeen, Evelyn, and I would all sleep on a triangular downstairs bed in the hull. The hippie would sleep on the cushions in the living room area, and Logan, his crew, and Sea Dog would sleep on the top of the boat, which had a hammock, a small cushion seating area, and a bag for the mainsail. As we left port, drinks were flowing. We were so excited to be at sea. With cocktails in hand, Nermeen, Evelyn, and I sat at the bow of the ship in our bikinis and sunglasses, looking out at the rich blue waters as the sun started to set and turn the sky a playful splash of auburn, orange peel, and cherry blossom. Within the hour, I would lose 4 out of the 5 pair of sunglasses I'd brought after forgetting that they were on my head and repeatedly jumping into the sea. Aww. "We have a surprise for you," Logan said, handing us more alcohol as he tossed his thick brown beard. The guys were definitely trying to get us drunk to see whom they could sleep with. "Look," he pointed as the boat slunk around a cove and a beach with a giant shipwreck came into view. For the night, we would be mooring at Navajo, a cove off the coast of Zakynthos Island, which had the most famous shipwreck in Greece. Grounded in the 1980s, legend has it that the 1937 Scottish coaster, Panagiotis, was carrying contraband cigarettes for the Italian mafia when it got lost in a storm and ran aground. It looked like a rusty steel skeleton with a huge crack in the middle. I jumped into the sea to swim to shore. I held my cocktail over my head, but it immediately filled with seawater. "We're going to have a fire pit over there," Logan said as he loaded our dinghy up with lumber, enough alcohol for a whole ship of pirates, and some sandwich supplies. "Are you sure we're allowed to?" I asked, with only my head above the water. It didn't seem like the Greek authorities would be too cool with a bunch of Americans lighting a huge bonfire next to their most famous shipwreck. "It's fine," Logan said. I swam away. I couldn't question the captain. For context, sailing can go from fun to deadly very quickly. The big base of the mast is in the center of the boat and is called the boom. A common sailor's joke is that it's called this because if you turn quickly, that thing can shoot across the boat at 95 miles per hour and boom, knock someone unconscious and throw them into the sea. On boats, there's a very clear hierarchy to be followed for the safety of everyone aboard. I had recently become a boss, but I'd be spending this vacation with a boss of my own. As we sat together around the fire, I admired how the flames lit up the red steel of the ship. It reminded me of when I lived in the mining town Esch-sur-Alzette in Luxembourg. The mountains on my morning hikes were the same red, filled with the iron ore used to make ships like the one next to us. A couple people from other boats joined us around the fire, passing bottles of rum around like pirates. On a high from our first day at sea, everyone got trashed. As I swam back to the boat to sleep, I saw Sea Dog and Evelyn peeking off the stern of another ship. Their heads bobbed in and out of the sea as they made seal noises while jumping straight up out of the water. Above them, a yacht owner with a Tupperware bowl of pasta in the crook of one elbow dangled pasta on a fork over their heads, as if feeding fish to seals. In the morning, a loud boat filled with tourists entered the harbor and woke me. I headed up to the top of the boat, and it was empty. What had happened last night? To check the shore, I dove into the water. A guide with a microphone walked along the white sand, a group of tourists following him. "That's not supposed to be there," he said, kicking at the soot left over from our fire. I doubted that you could normally have a fire here, but with Brexit going on, many of the government officials who normally patrolled this area were probably furloughed. Navajo is the most famous beach on Zakynthos, famous for the shipwreck from the 1980s. The guide said, motioning to the boat. The tourist looked on. "Water," Sea Dog said, stumbling from the wreckage. His hair flowing in every direction and ash from the fire streaked across his face as his skinny legs fought their way through the sand. "I need water." The tourist shrieked in horror as Sea Dog tripped in the sand, falling at the feet of the guide. He looked up as if he was trapped here from his own shipwreck. The tourist whispered for this stranger, "Please give me water. I'm so hungover." A Spanish dad slowly stepped forward, handing him a bottle, which he chugged immediately. "That's not part of our chore. We're going to keep moving," the guide said, stepping over Sea Dog and continuing down the beach. Part of me felt embarrassed that we were causing such a ruckus at a historical site, but part of me loved every moment of it. After all, it's not like the debauchery was hurting anyone, except for maybe our livers. Over the next few days, we island hopped across Greece, seeing varying ancient cities with cobblestone streets, castles, and eating all the gyros we could sink our teeth into. The days would start by waking up and hopping off the back of the boat. A coffee in one hand, I'd balance on a pool noodle and look out into the pristine sea, or the edge of a castle off in the distance. Then, near me and Evelyn and I would wander through the streets and stop in a plaza for lunch and an Aperol spritz, or 2, or 3. In the evenings, we'd all hop back on the boat and try to let the rocking of the sea lull us to sleep. Being surrounded by my friends, experiencing new cities, and enjoying the peace of nature were magical. By day 3, things started to change. "Remind me when we're at sea to empty the sewage tank," Logan said to a deckhand at one of the docks. On boats, there's a valve that holds all the poo, pee, and sea-friendly toilet paper you use on a ship. If every ship emptied at port, the bays would be filled with sewage, attracting sharks and other scavengers and making the docks reek. Boaters have to remember to empty out at sea. But a lot of general ship maintenance best practices were being forgotten. The men who were responsible for us had made some miscalculations. First, they had spent too much money on booze at the start of the week, so despite online saying our trip was all-inclusive, we needed to buy our own food, water, and more. Second, they had miscalculated the distance and time it would take to get from Greece to Montenegro. And because we'd gone in the opposite direction on the first night to see the shipwreck, we'd lost a day at sea and added to the number of miles we needed to travel. This meant that the days of wandering in small Greek towns were over. To get to Montenegro in time to make our flights, we had to spend 3 days nonstop at sea. We'd also be traveling by Albania, which Logan had researched and read was extremely corrupt. If we tried to moor, they might try to throw us in jail or extort us. We would not be able to touch land for 3 days. When we signed up for the trip, it was not communicated to us that half our week would leave us trapped, unable to do activities in order to get to our flights home on time. Then there was the third problem. "I have an announcement. We are low on water. So if you need to shower or pee, give me a holler. I'll stop the boat and you can do both at the same time," Logan announced. When you live on a boat, despite being surrounded by water, your boat can only hold a certain amount of fresh, clean water to drink, pee into, and wash your hands and do dishes with. This water is purchased at ports, which we wouldn't be at for 3 days. Lastly, there had been a crumbling of camaraderie on the ship, mainly because college-aged men are, as a complete generalization, idiots. One of our deckhands had sex in the cabin where Evelyn, Nermeen, and I were staying while we were at shore. We got back to the boat and discovered that not only did we need new sheets, but there had been an opportunity for all our valuables to be stolen because a stranger had been in our room without us knowing in advance. Furthermore, the couple on their honeymoon had thought that they were spending a romantic week together on a luxury yacht, and had not realized their trip would be more like sharing a campsite with a bunch of drunk strangers. This had led to constant bickering between them, as well as fighting with Logan. As a general rule, it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver when running a business. But the expectations of those going into Yacht Week and the reality of an experience where we couldn't shower or pee, had to buy our own food and drinks, and soon half of our, quote, week on the water would be spent trapped at sea, unable to touch land, had people angry. Those angry people were now trapped together in a tiny floating vessel, unable to walk away or find space when things got heated. Under an unforgiving sun, everything was heated. Before our long trek along the coast of Albania, we had one last night in the basin together. As we left the choppy Mediterranean Sea and entered the wind-protected cove, our boat glided across smooth waters. The cove was on a small island and only accessible by boat. The people who could physically get there were people who were predominantly millionaires, their families, and their staff. I was surrounded by successful bosses. There were some more smaller private boats, and then your mega yachts with helipads and whatnot. Donated to the charity, our boat had a beautiful navy hull that our 20-year-old captain designed with signatures of all the donors of the charity. Instead of the regular name like My Second Wife or Acting Naughty, that you saw on most ships, ours was called #@sea4rights, the slogan for the charity. While the passion Logan had for helping rehabilitate incarcerated men was endearing, in this setting, our boat entering the harbor was basically the equivalent of a trailer RV pulling up to a country club. To make it worse, Chicken Fried by Zac Brown band blared while Logan and the hippie swing dance on the front of our boat as we entered port. While the other yachters were delicately sipping their Sancerre Sauvignon Blanc at the sunset, they stared, their jaws dropping, as our boat entered their private slice of heaven. "Why are they such fans of chicken?" Nirmin, the only European on our boat, asked as the song played. This is not how you're supposed to behave in the upper echelons of European society. As the deckhands docked our boat, Logan continued to play loud country music, including Wagon Wheel by Darius Rucker. "They're all looking at us," Nirmin said. "I know," I said, watching our neighbors in the cove. A guy ran down the back of a mega yacht in the harbor. He left the big ship, hopping onto a small cream-colored tender with cream leather seats tied to the back. Full speed, he sped across the calm water to our boat. "Turn the music down, you assholes," he said in a thick Italian accent. "You don't like our music? Well, it's a free country," Logan screamed. While Greece was also free in the global model for democracy, it was not the country Logan was referring to. "Can't you see you're disrupting our calm evening?" he snapped back, his linen shirt blowing in the breeze. "You!" the honeymooning wife screamed. At this point, she had made it very clear that she hated Logan, but when it came to a rich European calling us out, her Floridian roots came out and she was standing by her countrymen. The Italian sped off, his middle finger in the air. While my younger self would have tried to chameleon my way into schmoozing with the affluent boat owners around me, I was having much more fun with my rowdy crew. Even so, Nirmin and I looked at each other. While we didn't agree with how the Italian handled things, we could understand how we were in the wrong. After all, this was a shared space. I think Evelyn agreed on this point, but she had started fucking Logan everywhere. In the sailbag, in the sea at the front of the ship, in the dinghy. Her trip would end with her spending a day wandering around Rome looking for UTI medication so she wouldn't be in excruciable pain on her flight back to New York. "You want fancy? We can do fancy," Logan screamed after the Italian before disappearing below deck. The music went quiet for a moment. The Dutch family on the boat nearest to us stopped staring and went back to doing their laundry, hanging bright orange sheets up on a clothing line. Then, as loud as Logan could increase the volume on his speakers, Mozart started playing. No one messed with us after that. In the inlet, there was a small public beach with picnic tables, a public restroom, and a small covered area. That night, all the boats headed to this area to have a little party, and we joined after dinner. The party was very family-friendly, mainly with adults over 40 and children under 10, putting our group solidly in the middle. Having not showered in days, I beelined to the public restroom. "Can you use hand soap as shampoo?" I asked Evelyn as I flipped my entire head of hair into the sink, filling my hands from the soap dispenser. If I could have, I would have fit my arms and legs in the sink to wash off the 3-day layer of sunblock, salt, and sand that accumulated on them, making me feel like a sticky sugar donut. Because I was so pale, my summer look was communion wafer. You could see through my skin. I could dissolve on your tongue and in your pool. Audience, I have a lot of self-tanner on right now. Thank you. Mothers shielded their children's eyes as they walked past me to help their young kids use the restroom. While I'd come on this trip as a sort of celebration for becoming a bougie corporate boss, I was starting to embrace the Florida lifestyle. It was being forced on me. To dress up fancy for our night with all the other yachts, Logan had put a tweed jacket with no shirt, Evelyn had a flowery dress over her white bikini with her initials written in sailing flags, and I was wearing a frilly blue sundress. All the other families were fully clothed in conservative attire you'd wear to a country club, polos and khakis or cocktail dresses. As I walked out of the bathroom, I flipped my wet hair. It felt like a greasy mullet as it slapped against the back of my neck. Some of those around me grimaced, having no idea why my hair was suddenly wet. Still, we all danced to Greek songs that none of us could understand. Despite the obstacles, a generous portion of Captain Morgan on our part, and likely a good Nebbiolo for the other yachters, our differences were put aside for the sake of a good old party. A conga line formed, led by Logan. As we danced, the German dad behind me wasn't putting his hands on my shoulders like everyone else. Put your hands right here, I said, pointing to my shoulders, as I assumed maybe he didn't know what a conga line was. Danke, don't need to touch, he said politely. Instead, he stood behind me, hovering his hands a few inches above my shoulders to avoid contact. Wow, I'm gross. As the party raged on, I walked out onto the beach, then swam to the floating dock slightly offshore. From there, I watched the party in front of me, people from different nationalities dancing under one roof. I thought about this trip and who I wanted to become. For lack of a better word, I was my hometown's trash and the cove's trash. But did I want to be fancy like the Italian in the mega yacht? If I was going to be a boss, was making money my goal, or would I consider my employees in the decisions I made? It was kind of fun being trash. I was moving up in the world, starting to build assets of my own, and could hypothetically buy real designer clothes. But did I want that? Would nice things make me happy? I knew a shower would. Reflecting on my happiest moments over the previous year, most of them were simple joys. Biting into a juicy dumpling, feeling the water on my toes, watching the sunset next to a good friend. Becoming worldly and sophisticated was exciting, but using big words or saying things like, I don't eat lemon pepper chicken, I only eat yuzu chicken, as one might if they were used to the fine life, didn't really make me feel like a better person. If anything, living abroad had made me use more basic English because for most of the people around me, English wasn't their first language. How I chose to communicate with people could be inclusive or exclusive. This was a choice. I had met, quote, citizens of the world that were pretentious and had used their status to lock themselves in bubbles away from the reality and hardships of the world. Was my purpose to sell luxury products? I was really good at it. Maybe being a good boss was another goal. That was definitely something I could work on. Sometimes I would get too passionate about my work and bring emotions into the office that didn't need to be there. As I traveled more slowly, my feet dragging, and I entered adulthood with a fancy job managing others, who did I want to be? Alone on the dock, I thought back to my childhood, playing barefoot in the rivers behind people's homes. There was so much joy in the freedom of not caring or even knowing what others think of you. Finding excitement in a water bug, or as you overturned a rock, a blue crawfish, its claws up in fighter mode. I watched everyone dance, this little moment suspended in a secluded cove in the darkness of night. Only the stars and I as witness. As I found success, did I want it to keep me in a bubble? I wondered if the people from the mega yacht were joining in on tonight's festivities, or if they had decided to pass. I didn't see the Italian guy who had screamed at us, probably best since we wouldn't want a fight to break out in front of the kids. The moment reminded me of how grateful I was in the life I'd chosen. The rest of our trip was a nightmare. Like those adrift, we were trapped. The sun beat down on us, and we only had a small amount of shaded space at the back of the boat because it was too warm to stay inside the boat. It also reeked of pee down there because if you had to pee, we weren't allowed to flush in order to conserve water. They did allow us to flush if we pooped. In that small pocket of shade with breeze, we were trapped with our group of people who hated each other. The honeymoon had been ruined, and none of us wanted to be there. I sat at the back of the boat with my feet in the water. I've Got Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks played in the background. I hate country music. I felt trapped and conflicted, and Sartre was right. No internet, no phone, and reading a book made me seasick. This was hell. I imagined letting myself fall face first into the water, weightless in this thick saltiness. The boat would keep on without me, and no one would notice that I was gone. Maybe that would be better than having to listen to that southern twang. Time to make a pee stop, one of the deckhands said as the boat slowed. We all jumped off the sides in the cool water. As I sat in a pool noodle, a small brown log the size of a Snickers bar floated by me. Is that? I said. Another one floated by. Oh, sorry, one sec. The deckhand disappeared below deck before returning. I had to switch the bathroom valve closed again, I forgot. He giggled. Swimming in I did not giggle. I didn't even get mad. I already knew this trip had gone to shit. Getting angry wasn't going to change anything. That night, we gathered around the back of the ship, telling horror stories to pass the time. I mean, we used the pull-out method forever, and then finally we got pregnant, the honeymoon wife said. At the time, I was not ready to have kids, mainly because I wanted to spend my days being a boat hoe, and kids couldn't float. It was extremely impressive that so many women had made new people. All I could make was microwavable mac and cheese. Even in that case, I could have made a band called Hot Bowl Cold Dish, which would be ballads for all the times I had pulled food out of the microwave early. So then we got married, her husband said, throwing his arms in the air. They both laughed. The bickering all made sense now. Let's go skinny dipping, Logan said. This time everyone got naked and climbed in. Because I'd heard Sea Dog say, maybe we'll get to see Kristen's huge tits a moment before, I decided to keep my clothes on. I was also still traumatized by the whole swimming in our feces thing. As the group climbed back on the ship, Evelyn shrieked in pain. Her toe had gotten caught in between the fiberglass of the boat and the wood of the ladder as Sea Dog had put his weight on the ladder to climb up. The hippie mother of the ship sprang into action. As the ship's grill rocked softly in the waves, she, completely drunk, hovered over its open flame, trying to hold steady a needle to sterilize it. Are you sure this is a good idea? We've all been drinking, Evelyn cried, a little nervous at how excited the hippie, a former nurse, was to use her skills on her foot despite being naked, wrapped in a towel, and intoxicated. Here, drink more, Logan said, shoving a whiskey bottle into Evelyn's hand. The hippie held firm on Evelyn's foot, the needle in her other hand. We have to alleviate the pressure. I have a phobia of needles, so I looked the other way as I held Evelyn's hand for emotional support. Our hippie pushed the needle through Evelyn's toenail to drain the blood below. The whole emergency surgery killed the friendly vibe. Evelyn, Nirmeen, and I pulled off from the group, sitting in the front of the boat. Did you hear that whole thing about the pull-out method? Nirmeen said. Yes, I said. Is that normal in America? I hope not, I said, but I have highly educated friends in New York who have also told me they do it. We were only taught abstinence only in school. I pointed to Evelyn and me. Don't even get me started, Evelyn shook her head. She had other things on her mind. I'm getting old, and how am I supposed to go to the Hamptons and find my future husband without a big toenail? She started to cry. We'll figure this out, I told her, putting her hand in mine. Maybe get a good pedicure when we get back. But what if my toenail falls off? I mean, who wants to see a big toe without a toenail? I'll never be able to wear open-toe sandals again. She looked me straight in the eyes, her eyebrows furrowed. No man is going to want to marry me if I'm missing a big toe. She was spiraling. That night, it was too warm and stinky in our room, so I lay on an outdoor pillow on the upper shelf of the ship to sleep. In the middle of the night, we were hit by a storm. Rain poured down on me while the front of the boat plunged up and down in the waves. Water poured over the side, spraying me. No one else was in sight. Off in the distance, I could see the moon glowing red. It was huge and touching the water. I had heard the old sailing phrase, red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. What in the hell was 3 a.m.? Should I be worried? If I fell off the boat, I would be dead. With the large waves and no one around, there's no way anyone would find me. When I was 9, I was swimming in the Atlantic off the coast of Fire Island right before a big storm. Suddenly, the waves started coming faster and faster. Desperately fighting to keep my tiny head above the water, my thin arms thrashed in the heavy salt water. Every moment I got a fresh breath of air, I'd be thrown under another oncoming wave. Luckily, a 65-year-old lifeguard named George saved me, but I would not return to sea for a year after, still scared from that day. Alone, I stared at the moon. To this day, I still wonder if I was hallucinating or if it was all a bad dream. I'd never seen a moon so large and close to the horizon. It felt like I could step off the ship and walk into it, as if entering the gates of hell. I could have gone downstairs to shelter, but instead I sat there letting the waves and rain wash over me. It felt like some kind of rebirth, like nature was reminding me that life is short and fragile. It was for me to decide what I wanted to do with my time. Yes, I had career success, but was I happy? Was life all about selling luxury products to make more money to buy myself nice things, most likely more luxury products? My work did pay for me to do trips like this. At least at my job, I was learning how to become someone's boss, which was a new experience and a chance for me to think about how I wanted to treat others. I walked to the very front of the boat, out onto the metal spindly edge at the front of the jib, and I stared into the devil moon, almost challenging it. Take me, I dare you. I still had a lot of living to do. The next day, we had our last day and night on the water. No one else had seen the devil moon, but they had felt the storm. While at sea, Logan let us take turns sailing the boat. A Greek beer in one hand, the steering wheel in the other, it felt good letting the wind of the sail direct me. I might have been swimming in the day before, but this was a new day. The next morning, moored off the coast of Montenegro, we were woken up early by a port guard on a microphone, zooming around our boat and screaming, "It is illegal to moor off the coast of Montenegro. You will be imprisoned if you do not follow me to the port authority." Every country has its own laws, and apparently in Montenegro, you could not check your boat in the morning, which is what Logan had assumed. Instead, you had to check in immediately when you arrived, even if that was 2 a.m. Montenegro is around the size of my home state of Connecticut and home to about 670,000 people. For those in the mega-rich super yacht community, the country is known for its $200 million port, which has space for huge yachts, a swim club with an infinity pool, and a long downtown promenade. When the port project was started in 2010, many were against it. "This country is for sale," said Vanya Kalovic, the head of MANS, a corruption watchdog affiliated with Transparency International. "Montenegro is selling everything it has, and I am just not sure what the country is getting out of all of this." However, the government was already well known for their corruption, having allowed many questionable businessmen to live there and do business who had to flee their home countries. A year later, you'd have Nat Rothschild, whose family owns Louis Vuitton, an investor in the port, throwing $1 million 40th birthday party for himself there. Was increased income inequality the future world I wanted? Was buying a Louis Vuitton bucket bag supporting the rich becoming richer? Was there a better way I could spend my money, maybe on small businesses? I saw that how we chose to spend our money shapes the future of the world we live in. And maybe I was right to not buy myself a designer bag, even if I could afford it. Having more responsibility at the office meant I'd have more disposable income, but it also meant being frequently stressed and having less free time to enjoy traveling and spending time with friends. While we had avoided Albania because of the corruption, we had clearly not dodged it here. The port authorities hauled Logan off and put him in a jail cell for the morning, but we were told not to worry. First, we went and showered in the public restroom on the dock. This was not the public restroom you might find at a public beach with "will suck for French fries" chiseled in the bathroom stalls. This was an exclusive spa-level bathroom. The shampoo and body wash smelled like lavender as I rinsed off days' worth of built-up grime. Eucalyptus leaves hung from the waterfall shower head. I never wanted to leave the scalding water. The stalls had bountiful toilet paper. I even hid some in my bag to take back to our boat. Next, we wandered down the main promenade. Evelyn's entire foot wrapped in gauze as we strolled past a bunch of luxury designer brand shops and size zero women in flowy dresses walking with bald, heavy-set older men in designer clothes. The strip felt like a cookie-cutter fancy outlet mall. We searched for some food. I wanted local food, not over-the-price generic Italian food. We walked one street behind the main strip, and the city was completely different. The main strip's luxury contractors had removed the old cobblestone walkways and buildings with flowers flowing from their balconies and replaced them with generic sheetrock tiles and beige stucco. The uniqueness of the former was so much more mesmerizing. Imagine having all the money in the world, and to attract you, people spend millions to make every location you go to look exactly the same. Haven't we watched influencers on social media standing in front of these large mansions with their designer handbags, fake lips, and extensions? When I was in the thick of that, it felt so foreign, so fake, like everyone was reaching for some ideal level of wealth that was never attainable and had diminishing returns on happiness. We found a bakery with €1.25 spinach pastries and more. There were blue-collar men and women there and no designer clothes. As we walked farther past the promenade, we came across a beach where an older woman knitted clothing while tanning. We sat in the sun, feeling its warmth against our bronze skin. When I got back to Shanghai, the sun would be blocked by all the pollutants in the air. As we got back to the ship, Evelyn ran to hug Logan, as he'd luckily gotten out of jail after paying a nearly €1,000 fine. He had lost practically all the money he was supposed to make for his charity for our week of the trip. On top of that, the nearby laundromat had threatened to call the cops on him after he refused to pay 250 euros to wash the boat cushions, as he hadn't asked the price before having them cleaned. On their boat with the microphone in hand, the laundromat staff blocked us from leaving the port until Logan finally paid. Soon, I was back in Shanghai on solid ground, taking this experience in stride as I thought about what kind of captain I wanted to be at work, how I wanted to spend my money, and who I wanted to become. When my theater teacher friend told me that the local English-speaking theater might go under, I happily went to their fundraising performance. To raise money, you could spend 100 RMB, around $15, to buy the cash shots as they performed Macbeth. In this private event in the dimly lit attic theater with a vaulted roof and catering chairs, I saw an Irishman, heavy-set with a ginger beard, slowly spinning while reciting Shakespeare, bottomless with his penis shoved in between his legs. It was hard to faze me, and no amount of money could buy that experience. It was priceless, and I was back home. That's all. We have time for like 1 or 2 questions, if anyone has any.
Is it a fun size or a king size hurt?
All of them are not fun size. All of them are not fun. Yeah, Alicia.
Spoiler alert, I guess, but are there any worse experiences?
Yes, that I will not currently get into. This is one of the fun chapters. That's all. Thank you, everyone, for coming.